Hello and welcome to Gin with Gwyn. I'm Oliver Gwyn, and this is where I give you my off the cuff and unrehearsed thoughts on marketing data and philosophy. This week is culture dead? Are we all slaves to the algorithm? We will try and tackle these big, heavy subjects in a small, satisfying way. So, somebody reached out to me because they saw my recent blogs about content marketing and they saw my previous blog about how I hate cottage industries. By cottage industries, I mean I hate social media creators who basically they don't create anything themselves. All they're doing is sort of commenting on somebody else, so their review sites, um, places like that, and then they complain because that thing becomes unpopular. The algorithm doesn't sustain them anymore, and they don't make any money off of it. And I feel like, well, you're not really creating anything. You can't really complain. And they sent me the Patreon State of Create report. And so now I'm going to comment on something that somebody else has made, which makes me a huge hypocrite. But I'm going to try and add some interesting thoughts to this. Just to say, this report is online, it's free, you don't need an email or anything on there. So, uh, Patreon State of Create report. So a few interesting things in here. So one of the things was 53% of creators say it's harder to reach followers today versus 5 years ago, which makes sense. There's more people creating content. It's a much more cluttered space than it was 5 years ago. It's really easy to forget how recent the internet is and the state of the internet 10 years ago versus today. I always find it funny when people put that they've been doing online marketing for 10 years, which I guess in theory I've had over 10 years of experience, but 10 years ago, what I was doing is not necessarily relevant to today's picture. It's quite drastically different. 78% of creators influenced by the algorithm and what they create, and 56% of them said it stops them or is a blocker for them pursuing their passions and interests because they just need to stay relevant. They just need to play the algorithm game so that it can make their time and profit valuable to them. So it actually blocks them more than half from doing what they want. And to me, I can understand at a certain point, if you get to a certain level of popularity, that being a creator becomes a job. But I think for most people, it starts off as a passion project. And it's sort of sad to me to see that over half of people think that it blocks them from pursuing what they're interested in because they want to follow the algorithm and get that money. Now, when I used to go into schools and say to people not to become YouTubers, I said one of the core reasons is it's a very unstable income when you're chasing this algorithm. And a lot of the creators validated that opinion. So 75% of people said that about TikTok, 70% on YouTube, and 81% on Instagram. So unstable income. And of course, most people now have to play multiple platforms, which creates more time and pressure on there and making content for those platforms. And what do people want? What do these creators want? Well, 81% of them say they want direct communication with their fans. And of course, there's a lot of new uh, platforms that are enabling this. So Patreon is obviously one, OnlyFans, although that's been taken over by the adult space, Substack, things like that. And the reason why? Well, 80% of core fans are willing to pay for your services. Then you're probably thinking, how does this relate to culture being dead? Well, I think in a world where we're all creating things on a much more frequent basis, I'm sure we've all seen those stats that every day now there's more images and articles and videos created than the entirety of humankind up until like 2012. Every single day, more than the combined efforts of all humankind. And so there's just so much more things out there. And because it's being created and absorbed and dismembered and regurgitated so quickly, it's become a blocker to a sort of shared culture. And I know a lot of parents are bemoaning this at the moment because they're saying, when they grew up, everybody watched the same shows. There was on so many channels. And so you all had that shared experience. You all had a commonality of things that you can talk about with your friends and family. And now it feels like if you've not got the right subscription channel, you might not see this thing. You don't have the same shared culture as everyone else, apart from, what you all encounter in class and all of those kind of things. So philosopher Umberto Eco highlighted this issue, stating that the internet gives us everything and forces us to filter it not by the workings of culture, but with our own brains. The risk creating 6 billion separate encyclopedias, which would prevent any common understanding whatsoever. So, yeah, really interesting. Obviously, if we all have our own algorithms, we all have our own preferences, then we're all going to have our own understanding of the world. And obviously, these things will change over time. But I think if you're a younger person and you're coming into this world where the algorithm is trying to feed you, over time, yes, your likes will change, but you're more likely to be swayed by that algorithm over time, and the culture will be sort of created in front of you rather than by creators that you follow. So one of the State of Create report's big findings was that creators are finding it more difficult to be found by the algorithm. The algorithm is not monetizing them or promoting them in terms of, hey, follow Oliver and he posts this kind of content. Instead, it is just trying to get them to be on the platform and optimize the algorithm, because then they can serve more ads on this. Another great quote here from Nicholas G. Carr in his book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. Culture is sustained in our synapses. To remain vital, culture must be renewed in the minds of its members of every generation. Outsource memory and culture with us. And I guess this ties back to that thought that because things are happening so quickly, trends are upping and downing all the time, that there won't be a shared culture and a cultural landscape for us to all understand. Even big cultural touch points from the pandemic, they had their peak and then they dropped off very quickly, whereas in the past, these things would be relevant for a lot longer. And the final quote that I want to go from for J. Ron Lanier, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, in his essay, Digital Maoism, The Hazards of New Online Collectivism. That's nice and easy to say, J. Ron. He critiques the collective wisdom of the internet, stating, if we stop to believe the internet itself as an entity that has something to say, we're devaluating those people creating the content and making ourselves into idiots. And I like that quote because I think it's primarily aimed at AI and ChatGPT. If we just start believing this collective knowledge is so good and it knows the answer to everything, I'm sure we've all come across that ChatGPT really doesn't know things. And also, culture and social media doesn't necessarily give us the answers that we need, especially to more niche or more in-depth questions. I feel like we see a lot of genericisms because people are chasing that algorithm because they need to be popular, and so they use shocking titles, they use top headlines, and they use sort of red top tactics like newspaper tactics to get our interest on there. And that's problematic because it devalues certain content. The pretty girl is going to get a lot more attention than the average looking girl, and maybe the average looking girl, no offense, has something much better or more meaningful to say, but the pretty girl who says nothing, because of popularity, because of algorithms, will get more likes and interests than anyone else. So in this world where culture is moving really fast, it's more difficult to get in front of the algorithm, and people are experiencing burnout trying to chase this algorithm. What can we do? Because the same thing has happened in business for a long time. If you're in fashion or e-commerce or any kind of business, there's always trends in the industry that you're trying to follow, or you're debating, do I follow this? Do we hit this issue? What's our take on this particular issue? I work in data. Obviously, AI has been very hot, and we purposely kind of took a step back and said, well, let's just wait and see. A lot of this stuff is bullshit, and we'll come in when people realize that. And so if the answer to the problem of chasing algorithms and chasing trends and not wasting time and effort and money bringing things to market, because they might, by the time we've done that, it might have already ended, is that we then need to establish core fans, and these core fans will pay for our subjects and we'll get them. How do we encourage that as business people? Well, platforms like Disciple report that engagement and interactions in community apps are 16 times higher than traditional social media pages and profiles, which underscores the value of creating dedicated community spaces for fans. But if you've ever had the unfortunate circumstance of running a community or a forum or a platform like I have, it's a nightmare. People are an absolute bloody nightmare, honestly. You get people arguing on there. You have to constantly monitor. People post inappropriate things. Whenever you have a group of people, it's very difficult to manage that, and it becomes not really worth the time. I don't know about you, but I'm a member of various Slack channels, various LinkedIn groups, various community pages, and on the vast majority of them, there is not that much interaction and engagement. Honestly, there is not. On some of them, it's really great, and that's typically where you have admins that are spending a large amount of time to encourage those things. But on a large portion of them, maybe it's just me, you tell me, there's not that much going on. And so people don't want to spend that time. And yeah, maybe you get more interaction on these things and it's better for your fans. And maybe if you have the right sort of space, you'll get that. But if you're selling biscuits or furniture and stuff, it's quite difficult to that. You've got to go category level, you know. Do people have such a big discourse about, you know, everyday items that they build or washing machines? No, they probably don't. So you can't really play that game. It has to be tied into category norms or interests or something a bit broader for you to have that space. And then it has to really be tied into justifying your time because there is more time needed on there. So that's a real consideration of like, how do you get to core fans? Well, I guess the first thing is you have to figure out what's the best way to communicate with these people and make sure that you are getting the most value for them and for yourself as a business. You have to have a decent platform and not just, I'm going to send you a monthly email or I'm going to add you to our events list. But all of these things take time and effort. Unless you've got dedicated resources, it's really difficult to do to build a community and to encourage it and to make sure that that community is nicely aligned to your outcomes as a business. But also that it provides value for people because we're all guilty of thinking of things in terms of profit and not in terms of value that we're providing. And so we have to play the algorithm game to get people onto this platform, and whatever that platform might be, we then have to make sure that we're doing a really good job of encouraging people and getting their likes, interest, and engagement on that platform and making those conversations relevant to them. And that's not so easy. And I think at the moment, most companies are guilty of working on the algorithm space, trying to get people interested, and they don't spend enough time on this bit. And maybe that needs to flip the other way around. Obviously, what would underpin those big efforts to make that experience good is personalization, and personalization comes from good, solid data about our core customers. And if they are the people who are willing to give us that data, or if we can get that data in a nice, easy way through surveys, through getting to know people, through asking a few additional questions, then we can build a really good rapport with those people. We can improve our personalization. We can enhance our data over time. But it's an over time metric. And so things like LTV predictions can be really useful for us to realize who are our core potential people when there's day one and we don't know so much about them. How can we figure out which are the right people? Well, predictions come into play where it tells us how similar they are to our core fans today. So just recapping a really long-winded post today, but creators are saying that it's more difficult to get in front of people. They're getting burnout from chasing this algorithm, and social media platforms, as I've discussed before, they don't care about creators as much. They know that they can get that content now because there's so many more people doing it. And so now their main aim is just to get more time from users and sell more ad space, which means that short form content has become the norm, but that's not necessarily good for creators. All creators are saying is that they want a more direct route to their fans, which is why Patreon, OnlyFans, and all these kind of sites have become more and more popular as a way of monetizing content as a direct route into that. And as a business point of view, because cultural trends are so fast and they're changing all the time, it's really difficult for us to get to market and hop on those trends sometimes. We also need to figure out a way of spending more time on engagement and less time on the algorithm. So those have been my thoughts this week on are we slaves to the algorithm? Today, I think most of us are guilty of trying to chase the algorithm and not spending enough time realizing that what comes next is maybe more important. Let me know your thoughts below, and if there's anything you'd like me to talk about, message me. I'll talk about anything. Thanks for watching.